it's really easy to just work harder and work faster. That's easy. You can just dig faster, right? But to stop and think, why am I doing this at all? And does it need to be done? And if it does need to be done, does it need to be done by me? Is where things get very challenging. So that's a long-winded way of answering you, but my framework is OAO. So optimize, automate, outsource, in that order.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Entrepreneurs are trying to create a business that can run without us having to be in every single aspect of our business. Sometimes we're the chef, cook, and bottle washer all at the same time. Today we have Ari Meisel, the founder of Less Doing. He's created the Less Doing methodology. We're going to learn a little bit about that today and how our businesses can run more efficiently without us being involved in every single nook and cranny of our business. Ari, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here.
Why is doing less, and the name of your company is Less Doing, so important to you? How did that come to be for you to be so important?
So it's a misnomer, I think, for a lot of people, because as we'll probably get into, I don't think would be described as somebody who does less in my day. But basically it came out of a need. I was 20 years old and I got diagnosed with a chronic inflammatory condition called Crohn's disease, which is considered to be incurable. And then very safe in the short story is that I have been free of that illness for almost 20 years now. But what it did was it took me from working 18 hours a day to working an hour a day because of the energy and how I felt. And the genesis, I feel like, for everything that has come since then, all the work that I've done and the books and the speaking and the coaching, is all based on the question of what would you do if you could only work an hour a day? And it requires such a different way of thinking and such a different set of systems than most people are usually used to, that a lot of the productivity advice and things that I recommend often run counter to what traditional productivity advice would tell you. And it morphed into a methodology called the Replaceable Founder, which is really about making people as replaceable as possible by creating systems and processes that do the things that you just simply couldn't get done if you only had an hour a day to work.
And what are some of the systems that you find yourself talking to people about that they typically adopt when they do select just 1 hour of work a day, and what that thing is?
So system, I think, is a broad term here, right? Because some people might see that as a piece of software or a program or something. Some people might see that as hiring a whole bunch of people to do stuff for them. It certainly can and often does include those things, but ultimately a system is there a method to how I do what I do? And as simple as that might sound, most entrepreneurs, most founders, and I think most executives, even the effective one, you ask them, why do you do the thing you're doing that way? Like, why do you pay bills this way? Or why do you do negotiation? Or why do you do social media that way? That's a stumper for a lot of them. And also, are you doing it at all? It's usually an interesting question. So it's really easy to just work harder and work faster. That's easy. You can just dig faster, right? But to stop and think, why am I doing this at all? And does it need to be done? And if it does need to be done, does it need to be done by me? Is where things get very challenging. So that's a long-winded way of answering you, but my framework is OAO. So optimize, automate, outsource, in that order. And the optimization a lot of times is looking at how we do what we do. What does the process look like? Are there inherent inefficiencies? And the answer is almost always yes. And how can we avoid those? Ultimately, we like to get to the point of, do I need to be doing this thing at all? And a great example of that is booking travel. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients who are CEOs of multi-million dollar companies, and either they or their COO are booking travel from them, because nobody could ever possibly say, oh, I prefer a window seat. There's nobody can understand that better than the CEO. So there's a big ego element to it. There's a big trust element to it. But one more very clear example for you of what a system is, that you ask people, I like to ask people, do you have a way of taking notes, or how to keep track of to-dos and stuff like that? And so many people would be like, I've got my notebook right here. No, that's not a system, right? You're just putting stuff in there, but most people don't ever come back to it. They don't have a way that they come back to it. A system would be an actual proper setup of idea capture that you then later on go and actually sort through and revisit and decide if you want to do something with it. And then a way of executing upon that later. That's a system. A notebook is not a system.
Love that. Talk to me more about the proper setup of idea capture.
I never want people to be more than 20 seconds away, no matter what they're doing. And that's not a random number. We never want them to be more than 20 seconds away from being able to capture an idea of some sort. An idea could be, I need to pick up milk from the store. It could be, I think this would be in a really amazing marketing campaign for a company, or in the hardest, whatever it might be. So there's a bunch of technological ways to set that up, but I really take that very seriously. So I have smart home devices in every one of our rooms pretty much. And this one is the one that starts with an A, and I don't want to say that because she'll wake up. I can tell her add this to my to-do list. That's one. I can take a screenshot with my phone. I can write something on my remarkable. I can do a quick voice note. I can use Carbon Voice, which is a voice communication tool that I use quite a bit. And a dozen other things. I can send a text message, I can call a phone number. All of these things are at my disposal. And I use some obviously more than others, but they all go to the same place. All of them create a new card in my Trello. So Trello is my preferred project management tool. I really love it. I know a lot of people really need to ClickUp and other things and Asana and whatnot. And you don't have to use Trello to be efficient. It's just the one that I really like. And we can get into more of that if you want. But everything goes there. So then the night routine for me is I go through that and I see, oh, this was an article that I saved that I want to read or I want to send it to somebody. This is a new piece of software that I want to try out. This is something that I want to send to my assistant to buy. This is something I need to tell my wife about. So I'm going to do that. And I store it in Trello until either I'm going to assign this to somebody, I'm going to do this tomorrow, whatever. I put a date on it. And that's it. And the important thing is that the idea capture brain is not the same brain as the sorting brain. Those are very different neurological states. And when somebody comes up with a great idea or what they think is a great idea, and then they go work on it for 3 hours to realize, what did you just do in the last 3 hours? This is a terrible idea. It happens all the time. And then the execution side of that could be days or weeks or even months after you come up with that, depending on the size of the project or the ask. And that's a very different mindset as well. So there needs to be basically a pipeline of how those ideas come out of your brain and turn into reality.
Ari, I have so many different areas to go with this. I'm going to start with the selfish one. You mentioned notes, and I heard you just a little bit under your breath saying remarkable, and I'm writing notes in my remarkable pad right now.
Cool.
I don't have a system for my remarkable notes today. I'm curious, very selfish question. How do you get your remarkable notes into your system? You just forward them to yourselves? Or you have it synced up some? I'm curious as to how you manage remarkable because I'm using this pad and I don't have a system for it today. I'm just curious how you do it.
Yeah, so there is the built-in sync option that you have with that. I think, I can't remember if it's paid for that or not, but without that, you can forward things. So worst case there is that you get in the habit of forwarding it to, for example, a specific email address or something you set up. And that email address months ago, I would have said to attach that to Zapier or some other automation. Now I would just attach it to an AI agent. And I'd love to get into that with you guys about how
Absolutely. That's coming right next. So keep going. I'm going to drive you right there.
built the ultimate chief of staff in AI now that I've been using. So I would just forward that to it, and it would sort it. I actually just had that happen right before we got on this call. I gave it 6 documents of very different functions of very different companies, and it just renamed them and put it all in the right places and then added that to its memory. That would be, otherwise I would use the built-in sync function and have it basically just do that. I would not, you want to have as little touch on it as possible, right? Because if it requires you even tagging it with something, that is too much hesitation as far as I'm concerned, and it'll become annoying and then you won't do it. So out of your brain, out of your head, and then it needs to come back to you later when you're in the right headspace for that.
Love it. Okay. So I'm getting there. I think I'm a few steps behind you. So I really hope you can push me forward. Let me share with you what I've done. I love to hear what you've done. But again, I'm very amateur and behind the ball a little bit. But I've set up what I'd like to be my chief of staff in an open claw environment. I'm taking transcripts from my calls that are automatically going into a Google folder for that particular person. And I have an email address for my assistant. I just haven't figured out how to get it all working yet. But I'm assuming you have something similar to that, where you basically have trained a model to be your chief of staff, and you can just forward it things. It will sort things for you. It will prepare your day for you. It will tell you what's going on with the next session you have, all those kinds of things. Is that fair? And if so, how did you set it up exactly?
So I'm asking you the question really quick because I wanted to tell me something I'm going to show you or some post present. Done. Okay. Let me have it get on here a second. So that's what you're describing to me is more like routing and rules, which is something I've been able to do for a very long time. It's actually the very first really big public speaking thing that I ever did was at Genius Network for Joe Polish 2015. And I was talking about my podcast automation process, which at the time required like 4 different tools and some people and all sorts of stuff. So it's great that you're doing that because you're in that mindset. But let me see if I can take you to the next level for you.
Please, I need help.
I have built, so there's a couple different platforms for doing this, and the platform is not really the answer per se, because there's quite a few out there. It's really about how you build it. And I worked with literally hundreds of virtual assistants over the years. I owned a virtual assistant company for a while. So I believe that I understand what it requires for somebody to do that job in an exceptional way. And so I spent weeks going back and forth to create the blueprint or the ultimate AI chief of staff, one that would be proactive, one that would ask you questions and push you on things, and one that's not just sitting there passively waiting for things to happen and can tie different things together. So one of the big things that is amazing to me, having worked with so much automation, is that automation isn't really great for the if this, then that, and maybe if this, then that, or that. What AI is doing that's so cool is the ability to really see different situations and provide some judgment and actually act on those things. So the main platform that I'm working with right now is called Nexus, I call her Nexus. I call it Nexus, is tasklet.ai. Now there's also twin.so. There's a bunch out there. People do this with Claude bot, which I didn't love that experience. I found it to be a little bit clunky. Tasklet is AI or is cloud-based. So I built this blueprint, and it's a 17-page PDF that I'm happy to share with you guys, and you can share with whoever you like. And it's not just the architecture and the technical aspect, but really the behaviors that make this an exceptional experience. And there's less doing methodology baked in there too, which informs that. I primarily use the web interface, but I can forward emails to it. It has access to just about everything. And what's cool about a platform like Tasklet is that you basically say, hey, I use QuickBooks, or I use OneDrive, or I use Paylocity, whatever. And it will be like, all right, there's an API connection. I can connect to it. Click this button. Or I need you to get me the account sheet. Here's how to get it. Or I can't connect to it because it's not the API, but I can spin up a virtual computer and use a browser and click around and do the things that I need to do without the API. So it can do all those things. It can make all those connections. It has access to my email. My calendar, all that is very basic. So those are the basic things. So one of the things that I had to do recently is a client I was working with needed to do Freedom of Information Act requests in every state, basically looking for toxicology reports rated based on a product that they were making. Every state is different. And basically I said to it, this is what I need to do. And it came up with a plan. It found where it needed to go for all 50 states. Some of them were email. So I'm like, okay, we just send an email to this person. Some of them we had to fill out a form. So I filled out the forms. Some of them we had to send physical mail. So I was able to use lob.com to send physical mail programmatically. And it was monitoring those, following up with those every day, whatever it needed to do. We start getting emails back, and okay, so we got an email back. You wanted me to fill out this form. I filled it out. I don't nothing needed from you right today. And then we got one back where it's like, all right, they need a paper check. Hawaii needed a paper check. So I was like, how do I deal with that? And good news, Lob can do that too. So I can Lob could print a check and send it with a letter. So it had managed this entire 50 state process for me with every single state being different. And even one case, the assistant told me someone wrote back from New Mexico and they thought that this was a bot. So I suggest you send them this email from your email telling them that I'm not a bot and I work for you. So it's doing all my social media for me. And now it started off by, here's a draft, you go and post it. And then I'd be like, can you do it for me? Because I don't want to do that. I can do it this way, or you can sign up for this service, which is free for 20 posts a month. And you can use that through an API. Okay, great. Now it does all my social media stuff for me. You can do the commenting, it does all the writing. I'm pretty sure the reason I'm on this podcast is because it sent an email to you guys trying to get me booked.
Love it. False. Awesome.
Every week it comes up with 5 podcasts that it wants to pitch me to, and it references old episodes and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, everyone is a very personalized email, and then it can handle the scheduling, of course, if it needs to. Budget stuff. So I can look at like family budget, and it found that like we'd been double charged for something 4 months ago, and then I had to go to Amex and dispute it for me. And then one other fun example is we got a hot tub cover a couple months ago, and from some random company I bought it from, and the cover was great, but then I opened it up one morning and there was a tear in the seam. And so I took a picture and I said, the hot tub cover that I bought had this. And it went back, found the email of who I bought it from, looked at the company's policies. It wrote up a whole thing to them explaining why this was clearly a manufacturer's defect. And then, and it knew when I bought it, and it dealt with all that thing. And then the last thing I just want to add is it can make phone calls for me. So there's a number of platforms for this, but I use bland.ai. So as a test, I put in my Trello that I needed to find a plumber to fix a broken dishwasher. It's not a real task, but I put it in there. It pops out 10 minutes later. It says, I saw you put that task in. Do you want me to call some plumbers? I said, yes. It called 12 different plumbers. It didn't speak to all of them. And I got to hear the recordings. And I'm not saying to it, like, I need you to act like a customer service person and contact this store and get this. No, I didn't have to tell any of that. It understood the task. It called, and I heard this conversation where it's talking to this guy, and he's like, if it's just the dishwasher, I don't just do plumbing repair or appliance repair. If it's something with the drain, then I can deal with that too. And the assistant clarified that, got the price, was able to schedule it, all of that stuff. I've had it book like dentist appointments for kids, like call in absent for kids, all that kind of stuff. So,
wow. I had never heard of tasklet.com. And it's tasklet.ai, excuse me, .ai, tasklet.ai. Rich, have you ever heard of it?
Nope.
This is the first time, like, I've been like trying to figure out this OpenClaw thing for 3 weeks now. And what is going on? I consider myself to be fairly sophisticated, but I couldn't get it to function the way I really want to remember things, to do things. And here you are talking about Tasklet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been missing this. I would love to get your 17-page PDF, because that's part of the structure, right? Learning how to set it up the right way is half the battle. But all the things you're doing are all things I dreamed of being able to do a few weeks ago, and I'm not even close to being anywhere near that. So I really appreciate you pushing that forward. Rich, I'm curious. We've been talking a lot about AI and this idea of powering an agent to do all these things, as Ari was describing. How do you see that fitting not only into your life, but also the lives of the entrepreneurs that you coach and work with?
I love the idea of the scheduling appointments. I've got something going on right now with radon in my basement. I saw a Facebook post that said in the area, Iowa has increasing cancer rates while the rest of the country actually has decreasing. And it was nitrates in water and radon in basements. I'm like, okay. So I order a radon test, and it's a 4.2 average over the last 2 weeks or so, which is not great. I have called 3 different radon companies twice each. Nobody has returned my call. I'm sure they're super busy. I would love to not have to think about that, deal with that in between coaching calls, or do that on the weekend, and just have that get done. That's an example of one. When you said the dentist scheduling, oh my gosh, I probably have to reschedule every dentist appointment at least once. I would love to just have that happen automatically. So I think there's something with scheduling appointments, making calls, that I'd love to start kicking into action.
Yeah. It just seems like we all have it. I love what you said earlier. Ari. I want to be the most productive and efficient person possible, but yet I find myself doing things that lead me back to not being efficient. And so I love what you're talking about. It must seem like, I guess, by what you just described, you almost feel superhuman in a way where you're doing so much more in a day than you possibly could. Is that fair?
Yes. Yes. So the biggest thing about this is that it's one of many ways around asynchronous communication, really how you can do things on your time. So all of my coaching, so I've been coaching for 15 years or no, sorry. Yeah, almost 15 years. And the way that I do it now is asynchronously. I use a tool called Carbon Voice, and I can send voice messages back and forth. I have clients all over the world that have one-on-one access to me, and I've effectively figured out a way to scale one-on-one coaching. I don't do any live calls. This is the only Zoom call I have this week with you guys. And I'm working with clients from 17 time zones right now that I speak to. Some of them I speak to every single day, but it's for a few minutes at a time. It's a more effective form of coaching that I found. It speaks to asynchronous communication. So if I have to call a plumber, right? But if I can say, the second I get on the phone, as far as I'm concerned, it's no longer my time, right? It's not. I'm giving that time over to whoever I'm dialing to and whatnot. And not that they're not worthy of it, but it's just not how I want to spend my time. So if I can tell an agent, hey, 11 o'clock at night, be like, we got to call a plumber, then I can forget about it until it's done. And the thing that there's a control element to that that's in a good way. Like you get to regain that control of your time, which is really huge. Yeah.
So I have a question with all this networked efficiency that you have with AI. Have you started using AI to use Carbon Voice and mirror your voice and your thinking so you're not even live doing that coaching?
No, not quite. I could actually. We could do that. So first of all, I thought we were going to go a different direction on that. So my virtual assistant has its own Carbon Voice account. So I can send Carbon voice messages to it, and I can then go on and do things. So it's one of the best ways for me to delegate something. But no, the one thing that Carbon Voice does have is if you clone your voice so that if you type a message, it will speak the other end in your voice, which is pretty cool. It also allows you to work in multiple languages. So if you speak a language and somebody on the other end speaks a different language, it will translate it in your voice and speak it out the other end, which is pretty neat too. No, I don't do that. What I do is that Carbon Voice has an MCP, so you can connect it to AI tools like Claude and stuff like that. So sometimes what I will do is because I do have times where clients will send me like literally 30 and sometimes 45-minute long messages where they're just like driving and talking. I'll go to Claude and I'll be like, check the last message from so on, give me sort of some of the highlights and then help me come up with a response. So I will go back and forth, almost like my coach of coaches, which is great because then what happens is I respond to the client 2 or 3 hours later with the 90-second silver bullet message that they really need to hear to go on with their day and get something done.
How many hours a day are you working?
It's a relative question because I love what I do all the time. But so actual work, it's probably 2 to 3 hours a day, I'd say. So I have 5 kids. So I'm taking the kids to school in the morning, and then I just had to go to a vet appointment for my cat, and then came back and got to do this. And then kids are done with school at 3, right? So there's like kind of a window that I operate within. I also love to get things done from 10 o'clock to midnight sometimes if I can. But I have a lot of different things going on. So I have my business, my coaching business. I am also technically a full-time employee with one of my clients who's brought me in as essentially a COO. I have a second part-time W-2 job. I just became last week the executive director of our local first aid and rescue squad. I've been a volunteer EMT for 15 years, and I'm now the executive director of our squad here. I'm also on the school board here in Princeton, where we live, and the board of a couple other charities as well. I guess if I do all that stuff, then maybe that's more hours. It's hard to quantify.
So you said 2 to 3 hours a day that you're doing work. How many hours a day is work getting done?
Like 75 probably. And I mean, not literally. So I always
75 hours a day out of 24 because you have all of these agents doing work.
So I like to think about the pit crew model of things. So in F1, pit crew is now the best ones, or actually not even the best ones. The average pit crew can do a pit change in 2 seconds, right? Like we've all seen that, right? The carpool, then they do. They're doing 3.5 minutes of man time work in that 2 seconds, right? Because there's 24 people doing stuff. So I always kind of think about that when I'm getting things done. my role, I feel like in a lot of ways, and what I try to get clients to as well, is to be like the first domino. So the typical example that I always like to think of, or the visual, is you got somebody walking up a hill and they've got two basketballs that they're pushing, or two Swiss balls, whatever, right? One going up here, one go up. They got to adjust here, they got to adjust there, and they're pushing those up the hill. My way of working is I'm at the top of the hill and there are 8 balls just sitting at the top. And I just have to go boom, boom, and knock them down.
The average entrepreneur who is just gotten into in the last 6 months Chat GPT and believe that's a be all to end all, who hasn't done any of this automation, what are the first 2 or 3 steps that they can take to get into this without overwhelming them on all of the things you have going on to get 75 hours of work done in a day? Let's save them an hour or two, or let's add an hour or two of productivity with AI that they're on top of what they're currently working. So what would be 2 or 3 systems or ways that they could get some things set up for the average entrepreneur to get going?
So I'll give you 2 very concrete things. And so this is part of the 17-page PDF, which again, I'm happy to send that to you guys and have you share it wherever you want. One of the first parts is that the AI will go back through 12 months of emails and calendar and figure you out. And it'll identify the areas where you're really spending a lot of extra time that you shouldn't be. And it is a window into the soul, looking at somebody's email and their calendar. So you don't have to get this PDF. You don't have to build a task list or anything like that. You can just go to Claude or ChatGPT and say, can you connect to because they can, they'll have MCP servers. Can you connect to my Gmail and my Outlook or my Google Calendar and look through the past 12 months of activity and give me proactive suggestions where I'm wasting time? That would be huge. That optimized step is a lot about awareness, because so much of the overwhelm that people feel is that they don't know what's causing the overwhelm. Just that. So that's number one. The second one is the asynchronous communication. I can't stress that enough. If you can start to push more of your communication to async, your life will get measurably better. Look at the meetings that you have, either the recurring ones, or just look at the next week and see all the meetings you have and start to think, could that have been an email? Could it have been a bunch of voice messages back and forth on a platform like Crohn Voice or something like that? Try to reclaim that time, even if it's one meeting a week that you start to take off, that will matter. Because again, it's not just the physical hour of time or whatever it is. There is everybody wants some element of control, and control over your time is a really big one. And when the number one source of email or the number one source of overwhelm that I hear, and I've heard for years and years from people, is email overload. Email's always a big problem. And it's because most people treat it like a to-do list that other people fill for you. And they lose that sense of autonomy and control. And so if we can start to take back our time a little bit, that's it.
Thanks for that. If people want more of you, where can they do that? And how would you like them to get in touch with you if they wanted to do that?
They should just go to talktoari.com. That's everything there. And it has a message from me on Crohn Voice. They can reply and it'll be me. It will not be a bot. It will not be an assistant. It will actually be me. Tell me what the productivity challenge you're struggling with.
Thanks for joining us, Ari.
Thanks for having me.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
75 hours of work done sounds unbelievable. However, I believe it with Ari.
Rich, I'm curious. Let's just assume, because we don't need to think about this, let's just assume we both work 8 hours a day. Most people work 8 hours a day. Let's just start there as a statistic. How many hours of work do you feel like you get done in your 8-hour day?
Ooh, that's a good question. Certainly less than 8. When I hear Ari, it's like an embarrassing, probably less than 8. There's always in front of the computer and just, as he said, going through email or doing some scheduling or moving something around, or I don't consider that getting work done.
Yeah,
It's
there's
things
inefficiency
that
in
I'm
our 8
doing.
hours.
Yeah, it's things I'm doing to prepare to get work done. So that's why I'd say less than 8.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. There's inefficiencies in what we're doing, that we're not being efficient for 8 hours. We're working for 8 hours. We're present for 8 hours. Maybe we're working 5, as an example. It's an interesting test and challenge, and I want to take it on, and I hope you do too. How can we actually get 8 hours work done in 8 hours? Or how can we get 12 hours of work done in 8 hours? Forget about 75 hours in a 24-hour day. Let's forget about that for a second. How can we actually get to the point where we're getting more return of work done than the hours we're putting in? And ultimately, that's ultimate in productivity. In my mind, if he was getting 8 hours of work done in his 2 to 3 hours, I would have been impressed. The 75 hours is really having these agents working on all these different levels. And I think a lot of times we as an entrepreneur or leader, we think about, to your point, ChatGPT, where it's okay, I'm going to go into ChatGPT, I'm going to talk to it, it's going to give me a response that helped me become more efficient. Which, by the way, I want to challenge you maybe a little bit because I'm doing a lot of that too, that maybe I'm not giving myself credit for. That's saving me a lot of time. Maybe I'm closer to 8 hours in an 8 hour day
Mm,
than maybe you were
I'm
giving.
probably similar now that you bring that up.
Yeah, because I am using the tool. It's saving me an hour here, 30 minutes
Yeah.
here, whatever. That probably adds up to the inefficiency in
Yeah.
my
Agreed.
schedule. So let's just say we are 8 on 8. The challenge I'm taking from this conversation is how can I try and start measuring this to start getting more than the time I'm putting in? I'm not probably going to work less hours. I enjoy what I do and I have my schedule organized now with the kids being away, things like that. So I have an easy starting spot, which is, do I know how efficient I'm being? And as I sit here today, I don't know that answer. And you don't either. We're going back and forth. But I'd love to start measuring that. You can't improve what you can't measure or don't measure, like we talk about in management. So I'm gonna start doing that. I'd love to see if I can get my 8 hours a day to become 16. And the idea is to have multiple agents working for you in different platforms, not one-to-one relationship like ChatGPT. Have multiple agents, one that's doing your social and commenting on social stuff, one that's doing this over here, one that's doing that over there. That to me is a challenge accepted off this conversation with Ari.
I feel like a question to ask ourselves is how much work got done today which did not take a human's time?
Yeah, that's a fair
Because we
question.
could say, oh, we delegate something or we hired somebody to do it. It still took a human's time. Like what got accomplished today that did not take a human's time? I feel like that's a really good litmus test for did you leverage AI today? Because you could say, oh, I went to Chat GPT. You still went there. That doesn't count. What outcome occurred today that did not require time from a human?
Yeah. To
Or
your
the time
point,
from a human was like what Ari's talking about, taking a picture and then 4 things happens after that. So the time from a human was 2 seconds and it was 30 minutes of work that created an outcome. I
yeah.
am not leveraging AI that way, and that challenge I would like to take on.
Yeah, it's a great point because you can leverage your time by delegating to 5 employees. And the 5 employees work 8 hours a day, and therefore you got 40 hours of work done today and you didn't do anything. But I think this exercise we're talking about is how do you become more personally productive beyond your delegation to team members and your time? How are you personally using tools to become more productive? And what I liked about Tasklet, Rich, is it seems like it's a souped up chat GPT. I was taking a look at it as he was talking, and it looks like chat GPT. It smells like chat GPT, but behind it is really all these integration of tools. And it's so hard to keep up because I'd never even heard of this thing before. And who knows, maybe next month, ChatGPT is going to have their version of Tasklet. There's all these tools that just keep one upping each other along the way. But I think it's important to get started somewhere. And I love this idea of building a repository of all of your information in a secure way. And that's the part that I think people will struggle with is how do I get this stuff to be secure?
If I go all the way back to the beginning of the conversation with Ari, he asked, "What would you do if you could only work an hour a day?" And I don't think the answer would be I would reschedule a dentist appointment. The answer wouldn't be I would do some calendaring. The answer wouldn't be I would go to email. It's a really interesting litmus test for what would you do for that 1 hour? And then backing out from that, all the other things, can we automate that somehow? Can we use AI somehow to allow us to just do that hour? I think that's a powerful question Because there are a lot of things I think we do that we would not do for that hour. We should be able to automate that, is what I'm hearing from Ari in his message.
Yeah, I love that. Rich, the other area I'd like to ask you this question. What should be asynchronous communication versus regular communication? I'll give you a good example. Our company was doing town hall meetings, and we had 120 people in the company. That's 120 hours of people getting on a Zoom or a Google Meet to hear the town hall and presentations and everything else. In my view, that should probably be an asynchronous meeting. It gets recorded, it gets sent out. You can watch it at 2x speed. You can do whatever you want. You may not even listen to it, but you may be on it and checking your emails or checking your Instagram posts while you're on the meeting too. But to me, that's a form of, hey, that should probably be asynchronous communication. But then you have, according to EOS retraction, level 10 meetings where you're meeting with a subordinate and going through what's going on. Probably can't be asynchronous. I don't think you would subscribe to that being asynchronous as an example. Where's the line? Where's the line between that should be asynchronous and this shouldn't in your mind?
By the way, you brought up town hall, and I think there's usually a one-way version of town hall where updates are given, and then usually town halls open up in the Q&A. I wonder if the asynchronous opportunity with town hall is the Q&A becomes asynchronous, because it becomes some of the most wasted time by everybody who's on the call or in that meeting to hear questions that they don't have that question and they're not particularly interested in the answer. So they have to gut through waiting to hear that question, to hear that answer they don't care about, and hope that the next person that has a question, maybe they will care about. If you have a question, you can get that answered. Then I bet, John, we could figure out, where do we store the repository of that Q&A so it becomes searchable? So if you do have a question, you can then go get that answer. But I think hosting a live Q&A with 120 people is probably something that could be moved asynchronously. I do think there's something to the connectedness of being live, virtual, or in person with people. I just had a coaching call this morning where the entrepreneur who I'm coaching showed up, said, "Hey, everything's going great. Sunshiny day. I'm feeling good. Things are going good with my staff. I don't have any fires for us to put out." And we sat on that for a minute. And I said, "Hey, let's look at things that are really important but not urgent, and work in planning and prevention and opportunity, quadrant 2 in the Eisenhower matrix." I said, let's work in there. Why don't you take just a minute of silence and just think about, what are things in quadrant 2 that are really important but not urgent that we could talk about? And after you take a minute of just thinking, let me know what comes to you. It literally took probably a minute of silence. 2 things came to me that we could talk about. 3 things came to my client that we could talk about. We made a list of 5 things, and we dug in and got real value out of talking about something that wasn't urgent. Now, if I was just doing coaching asynchronously, I don't think I would have gotten a call this morning. But the fact that there was live time that was scheduled and we wanted to use it well is the exact gateway that got us to talk about something in an area that wasn't urgent, but was very important. So I feel a little stuck on the value of that, versus I can imagine if it was asynchronous coaching, people are going to be constantly calling with certainty as to what they're calling about. One of the values of that live time is, it's okay if you're uncertain as to what we'll talk about today. We'll find value. I promise we'll find value. You'll get off and say, this was a great call. Even if you have no idea what we'll talk about today. You can't get that with voicemail coaching. So I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, but let me challenge just for a second, give you a different view. How many other coachees of yours could benefit from that exact same question? And could you not send that question to all of your coachees on a Monday morning and saying, hey, get out of the grind of the business today at some point, take a couple of minutes and think about this quadrant and get back to me with 2 to 3 things you should be thinking about that are important but not urgent. And they could all return them back to you, and you could have a basis of information to kind of keep going back and forth with them. That's a good one. Hey, I know you're busy this week, but I really want to dive into this particular important aspect with you. And you can have those conversations keep going, as opposed to waiting for a moment 3 months from now when one of your coachees has nothing to talk about and you start talking. So I would argue that you can be more proactive with posing questions where you record one voice message and send it out to your 10 coachees or how many coachees you have, and have them responding back with responses that it has something currently moving forward. I can see both sides of it. I do agree with you that there is value in human connection. I think there is value in getting with people that you're working with on your in your company, or people you're directly reporting to or reporting to you, where you're having that direct connection, rapport and conversation and finding and troubleshooting and problem solving. But I also believe very strongly that there's a large piece of all of our days that could be done asynchronously. We're just not used to it yet. But it's going to come, and it's going to come faster than maybe we think. And I think that's something that Ari's leaving us with us today.
I agree with what you're bringing up. That's an opportunity. My first thought was, yeah, but that's assuming that I have the answer. And I think there's a blend of I can help people get clarity with their own answers. And then sometimes I have answers based on my experience and so forth. And then my mind went to, you could do that on voicemails. You could do that asynchronously. I could still ask questions and say, tell me more about what you mean by that. That's it. Then when they have time later today, they can tell me more about what they meant by that. So I like the idea of the conversational exchange instead of question answer. That's something I may consider piloting, is a conversational asynchronous exchange that doesn't rush to action or an answer, and we take a similar time exchanging those as what we might if we were on in person. We just don't have to take the minute or two of silence together, which is inefficient. So I get what you're saying. I think there's room for it. I'm going to continue playing with it. I'm really thankful Ari came on. He really took things to another level you and I have not talked about, you and I are not doing. We've not seen another podcast guest take it to the level he has. And if you want more good content like this, tune in next week. Look forward to bringing it to you.